Hey everybody, this is Chris, and I hope you'll excuse me the thumbnail image because you have to fight to get views online these days. But stick around because I'm going to share with you my experience and tips living in China and being married to a Chinese woman for more than 10 years. We got married when I was in my 20s, now in my 30s. I lived in China for more than 7 years in total, including when I was single, with other guys from the UK and other countries who have also dated Chinese women. I've been married for more than 10 years. If you know my channel, you know that I studied Chinese at university and I speak fluent Mandarin and conversational Cantonese as well. I can understand quite a few Chinese dialects and I know quite a bit about the culture and language. And it's not to boast, but I think this is relevant as background to this video. And some people ask me, did you learn Chinese because you wanted to be with a Chinese girl? Actually, no. This is something that I didn't discover until later. At the beginning, I was pretty young, pretty clueless, naive. I didn't really know a lot about a lot of things. But I've always been interested in other cultures. In fact, I think one of the most beautiful things in this world is multicultural relationships. I absolutely love seeing people of different cultures, countries, and races together. It's good for mankind, I think. It's good for our mutual understanding, and it leads to an interesting life. So it was always going to be likely that I was going to end up with somebody from a different culture. And I ended up studying Chinese, so you could say the rest is history. So should you date a Chinese woman or marry a Chinese woman or whatever? Sure, if you want to. I'm not saying you should look for that exclusively. I really hate the word yellow fever, and it's just not a nice thing to talk about. But Chinese women are great, beautiful, dress well, keep themselves well, care about their appearance. I have had British friends who have been female friends in China, and they've said, like, you know, there's a lot of competition because these Chinese girls and young women are dressing in party dresses all the time and going around. And when she came back to the UK, it was like kind of quite a contrast. So I think there's a lot of competition in China. People care about their appearance. Chinese women are kind and caring. They have all the good qualities of women from other countries as well. There are cultural differences, but none too great in my experience if you're with the right person. So you can divide this into, and this video, I want to say this video is purely informative. I'm not the world's leading expert on this or anything. It's just based on my own experience. But I think I can offer some practical advice and experience. So that's the disclaimer. And I would actually divide it into Chinese women in China, or maybe who have just arrived in a foreign country, who I would call more culturally Chinese, and also Chinese girls or Chinese women who've been abroad for a few years or longer, or even second-generation immigrants. That would include ABCs, British-born Chinese, and so on, in Australia or whatever. And these people who have been abroad for longer, they tend to be more immersed in foreign cultures, less, I would say, less culturally Chinese. But obviously some of the Chinese culture sticks, and it sticks around a long time. So let's talk about the so-called more culturally Chinese women first. And in China, there's very much a culture of dating with a clear aim of getting married. And some people online have said that Chinese girls are easy, which I really don't like. I find it kind of nasty to describe a whole country or race as like that. They could be, some are not. We shouldn't be disrespecting people because they just come from a different culture, or just making blanket statements like that. Not everybody is looking just to get married, but there is a strong societal expectation to get married in China, and fairly young, or at least in the past, and not hang around too long. People's parents will be pushing them. Of course, if that's not to say you can't date, and people won't date. If the person isn't suitable, you can't just stick around. But it also doesn't mean that you can't do anything before getting married. It doesn't mean Chinese women are super conservative, really. And maybe not as conservative as you might think. So don't worry too much about that. But I would say that don't be surprised if this topic comes up earlier than you might expect. The M word. Yeah, but there is an expectation also that the man will treat the woman, especially on first date or maybe even the first couple of dates. But it's not like some places I've heard where the guy's expected to pay all the time. And certainly not for all the dates. There would be, you know, like treating each other, or I get this and you get the next one kind of thing. This is kind of normal. And the places that people date regularly normal compared to Western countries, I would say. The same kind of stuff. Also, you might have heard the 5 love languages. There's a book called The 5 Love Languages. You know, how people expressing their love. And I think this is mainly universal. I would say it essentially applies in the same way in China. But I would say in China, there's one called acts of service. I'd say this is particularly important because Chinese guys can be quite subtle sometimes, but they show their care and affection in everyday life by doing things for the girl they like, or just subtle things, buying things, a text message, communicating and doing things for their partner. And if you do the same, even if you want to be subtle, the girl will, after a while, generally get the message. Of course, if you want to be less subtle, then you can. It's very much up to you. In the past, people have said that Chinese women are submissive, but I found this just not to be true at all. This probably a century ago or something. They can be very strong characters. And you've got to remember that there are still fewer women than men in China because of the one-child policy and hangovers from that. So in a way, it's quite competitive. And also online I've seen people saying that Chinese women are very materialistic, or even some East Asian women in general. And I found that this can be true in many cases, but it's not everyone. Again, it's a bit of a generalization. There are a lot of social pressures in China, and life is not easy. The economy is not easy. Traditionally, it is the man who provides for the woman. And Chinese men are often expected to be able to provide a house for their partner to live in order to get married. You'll see this a lot on Chinese dating shows and on social media in China. However, as pressures and prices rise and the economy is not doing so well, it's now more mixed. So women who previously would want everything, you want a house, you want a car and a good salary from the guy, might not now be more practical, especially in the big cities where life is just so expensive and buying a house would also be difficult. So both partners or both families might help out. And traditionally also the man would also give the wife a dowry, like a cash contribution when they got married. But that's not always the case now. And sometimes there could be one from both sides. And they might not expect all of these things from a foreign partner. From a Chinese person, maybe yes, but that's just something to be aware of. It's not necessarily a deal breaker. Do you have to speak Chinese? You don't really have to speak Chinese. Obviously, it helps to understand the culture and the language. Speak to your friends, in-laws, and so on. I've seen guys who try to get a girlfriend by offering to teach Chinese or I'll help you learn Chinese. And girls want to learn English. And that's a pretty harmless reason to be together, but it's not really enough to sustain things or really provide a long-term relationship. Also, in China, if it actually comes to marriage, you are not really marrying so much just the girl, you're marrying into the family. This is kind of a stereotype, but it's also true in a lot of cases. Normally, you would need to have the blessing of the in-laws before you got married. And they might be involved in wedding planning. There's a lot of grandparents in China pushing to get grandkids, maybe even more than in the West. And even when you have kids, it's common for in-laws to be very hands-on with them, even the guy's parents, which is not so common in the West. And it's even common for your mother-in-law or even father-in-law, or either, to stay for a few months or even longer when you have the baby to help out. And because it's maybe more culturally in China, people are the grandparents are looking after the young children. So this can cause pressures at home or in the relationship, even for Chinese guys, like some of them can't take their mother-in-law and so on. But for Western guys, it would be up to the two of you, but you might face pressures from that. But sometimes it can also be useful to have hands-on grandparents, so you can have, everything has a positive and negative to it, I guess. But it can be difficult when you're dating, even if you don't get on with your girlfriend's parents, and that just compounds or it gets worse when married. So if it's a Chinese woman who's in the West and maybe doesn't have that much contact with their parents, but it will always come up probably later. So all the things that I've just said really relate to what I've described as the more culturally Chinese, the people who are actually in China. This would also extend to, I would say, students studying abroad who have just come out of the country because they're basically culturally Chinese. They've just left the country and strong ties to their home country. And then the second category was the less, quote-unquote, culturally Chinese. So the extent to which the things that I've just said apply depends on the individual girl or the time that they've been outside China or so on. Some people might be more westernized, especially if they're second-generation immigrants. So if that's the case, then if you are interested in Chinese women or dating Chinese women, then you can also find them in your own country, in a lot of Western countries, right? Students, graduates, or even people staying on to work, or even second-generation immigrants. so-called British-born Chinese or American Chinese or whatever. And in this case, the cultural gap can be less significant. You know, they might speak better English. You could find more common ground, more internationalized. And finding more internationalized, if you're interested in Chinese women, more internationalized women can also be good in many cases. So my wife also studied and worked in the UK for some time, and she, even when we met, she spoke better English than a lot of the girls that you would meet in China. And not that I didn't speak Chinese, but I think that really helped to bridge the cultural gap as well as the linguistic gap. Obviously, a lot of people have a linguistic gap. Not so much in my case, but that can really help. And also the girls who study abroad are generally from much more culturally open families. You would say more well-off families because it's expensive to study in the US or in Australia or in the UK. And obviously good family backgrounds. And potentially your in-laws might be more open-minded as well. So that could be a great option for you. And certainly it turned out well in my case. So obviously, if this is something, if you are interested in Chinese women or Asian women in general, good luck to you. If you do find a Chinese girl or a Chinese guy, even, a lot of these things might be true for Chinese guys, and a lot of this stuff that I've been talking about is also relevant. Just enjoy the beauty and the meaning of an international, interracial relationship. It's a beautiful thing. And obviously to most guys, women are amazing. Like, you know, one of the joys of life. I never regretted marrying a Chinese woman. So put it that way. If you have any questions at all, leave me a comment. I don't know if I can answer. Like, you know, I'm not a world expert or anything, but I will certainly try. And if people are interested in this video or you've got further questions, I might potentially do follow-up videos. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please do give me a like for this video. Subscribe to the channel, loads of different content that I'm hopefully going to produce. And thanks for sticking around. I will see you again really soon. This is Chris, signing off. Once again, take care, everybody.